The moment David found the journal, it was hidden beneath a warped floorboard in the study of his late uncle's house, a house no one had stepped into for over 15 years. The journal was unlike anything he'd ever seen, bound in cracked leather, brittle pages filled from edge to edge with a script he couldn't decipher. The characters seemed hand-drawn, but wrong. They twisted in unnatural ways, like the ink itself had resisted containment. He took it to the light by the window, thinking perhaps it was an old form of Latin or Greek, but no language he'd seen in his studies looked like this. David wasn't just curious, he was obsessed. A linguist by trade, he had spent 2 decades decoding ancient dialects, but this one wasn't listed in any of his references. The first page had a date, August 9, 1937, and beneath it, 3 words in English that sent a chill through him: "Don't speak aloud." The next night, David brought the journal to his apartment in Istanbul. He placed it on his desk, the only light coming from the orange street lamp filtering through the curtain. He stared at the pages, running them through translation software, even contacting a colleague in Prague who specialized in proto-languages. No one recognized it. But then came the voices. Soft at first, whispers, as though someone was reading the journal in a nearby room. David froze, heart pounding. He rushed to check the hallway. No one. He sat back down. As he touched the pages again, a sudden memory surged up. A house. His uncle, much younger, crying out in a language David now realized he had heard before. In dreams. Determined, David recorded himself reading one of the shorter passages phonetically into his voice recorder. He played it back, and the lights flickered. Every time he replayed the clip, the lights dimmed more. The air grew colder. By the 4th playback, his voice was no longer the only one in the recording. Another voice, low, raspy, and not human, repeated his words, mimicking them with a slight delay. David shut the recorder off, sweating. He deleted the file, or thought he did. That night, his phone turned on by itself. At 3:06 a.m., the recording played. He woke to the sound of his own voice and something else echoing through the apartment. When he checked the recorder, the file was gone, but the journal was open to a new page. The new page had a sketch, or a map. David couldn't tell. It showed a house with a basement, a set of stairs going beneath the earth, deeper than any basement would reasonably go. At the bottom was a black square, and from the square, the unknown script spilled outward like veins. The date beneath it was the following day. At 3:06 p.m, his phone buzzed with a calendar notification. Go beneath. David stared at the screen. No app on his phone was connected to his calendar. He hadn't added anything. And yet, when he walked into his building's basement at exactly 3:06, the lights flickered, and one of the floorboards creaked open. There was a hatch, a tunnel descending at a steep angle, recently carved. The air smelled like rust and wet stone. Against all reason, he climbed down with a flashlight. The walls were marked in the same language from the journal. The deeper he went, the less oxygen there seemed to be, though he never gasped. It was as if the air didn't deplete, it just thickened. At the tunnel's end, he found a door. Metal, ancient, covered in handprints scorched into the surface. He reached for the handle. The moment he touched it, a memory struck him. A child's voice, whispering in his ear when he was 8, repeating that same strange language while he slept. He thought it had been a nightmare. He opened the door. Inside was a chamber with walls entirely covered in script, floor to ceiling. In the center, a pedestal. On it, another journal, identical to the one upstairs. He walked in, and the door slammed behind him. He screamed and hit the door. It wouldn't budge. He turned. The journal on the pedestal flipped open by itself. A voice, his voice, began reading the words aloud from within his mind. He wasn't speaking, but the air around him was vibrating. The language wasn't just spoken, it existed as vibration, pressure, atmosphere. His nose began to bleed. His eyes burned. Shadows peeled from the script on the walls like smoke rising from letters. They formed shapes, humanoid, twitching, malformed. David dropped to the ground, screaming. Then he heard it, laughter, not from one voice, from hundreds. It echoed within the chamber, circling him. The words on the walls shifted again, forming his name. David, then, return, then, not yet. And the door opened. He staggered out and fled the tunnel. When he reached his apartment, the journal was gone. In its place was a blank notebook, its pages pristine. But when he blinked, the pages were filled again. The same script. And then he spoke a word aloud, just one. His own voice repeated it in dozens of tones. From the window, from his bathroom, from the phone, even though it was off. His reflection in the mirror smiled and said it back. Something had changed. Something had crossed. He contacted his Prague colleague again, sent pictures. She called him sobbing, said she'd seen the script in her dreams since he'd shown it to her. Her nephew had started drawing the symbols in his sleep. David stopped leaving his apartment. The lights flickered even when the power was out. He no longer trusted his own voice. He wrote everything now, never speaking. But the script kept appearing. On his food, in the steam on his mirror, in the bark of a tree outside. Weeks passed. David wasn't alone anymore. In the dark, he heard footsteps. In the mirror, things moved behind him. And always, that voice, whispering from the journal that no longer existed, words he still didn't understand, but now feared more than anything. And every time he tried to forget, another page filled itself in. This wasn't a journal, it was a door. It began with a stain, a dark, circular blemish on the wall of Mark Holwell's newly bought countryside cottage. The former owners, an elderly couple who had moved to a care home, said nothing unusual ever happened in the house. But Mark, recently divorced and in need of solitude, couldn't shake the feeling that something was off from the first night. The house creaked in unfamiliar ways, as if groaning with words unsaid. And that stain, it was on the far end of the hallway, just beside the study door, growing darker every day. He first noticed the writing when he tried to scrub it off. Under the wallpaper, beneath layers of old paint, thin black ink bled through in curves and sharp edges. Symbols, not letters. Some coiled like snakes, others jabbed like daggers. It wasn't a language he recognized, thinking it might be Old Romani or Nordic script. He took a photo and posted it on a linguistics forum. The replies were swift and unsettling. Not any known alphabet, one said. You shouldn't be playing with this, warned another. Ignoring the warnings, Mark became obsessed. The writing continued beyond the wall, beneath the floorboards, inside drawers, etched faintly into the wooden beams in the attic. Some were so small he needed a magnifying glass to read them. They pulsed when he got close, almost like they were breathing. He started to hear faint whispers at night, unintelligible. like a dying radio signal in a storm. One evening, while inspecting a plank near the baseboard, he found a small hollow behind it. Inside lay a faded journal, the leather brittle and cold. Its pages were filled with the same language, accompanied by frantic sketches, faces without eyes, figures hanging upside down from trees, a symbol of an open mouth with smoke pouring from it. At the bottom of each page, a date, always in the past, always crossed out. Mark took the journal to a local university professor named Dr. Elsie Grant, an expert in ancient languages. Her reaction was immediate and unnerving. This isn't ancient," she said, eyes wide. "This isn't even human." She refused to keep it overnight. "There are things we're not meant to read." That night, Mark returned home to find every mirror in the house cracked. The whispers had changed. They were clearer now. He couldn't understand the words, but the tone, pleading, angry, mournful, seeped into his bones. He started waking with blood in his ears, his nose, his eyes. The writing on the wall was no longer still. It writhed when he looked at it, rearranging, spelling something new each time. His friend Jason visited, concerned after Mark missed 3 days of calls. Jason's reaction was immediate. "Man, what the hell is that on your wall?" Mark tried to explain, but the words stuck in his throat. Jason stayed the night, despite the tension. By morning, he was gone. The guest room bed looked untouched. Only a smear of blood led from the bedpost to the hallway, stopping at the stain beside the study door. The police found nothing. No sign of entry or struggle, they said. Mark's story didn't help. Symbols that move, voices in another language. The officers exchanged glances. They suggested he see someone, professionally, but Mark knew what he saw. He heard Jason screaming. He felt the air bend around him as if the house were exhaling. Mark didn't sleep anymore. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the journal pages burn and then rebuild themselves. The unknown language bled into his dreams. One night, he found himself writing it, his hand moving on its own. He carved into the walls, the floor, his own skin. The pain didn't wake him. Only the sound of someone else breathing behind him did. He turned, expecting an intruder. There was no one, but the study door was ajar. Inside, the wallpaper had peeled completely off. A message covered the wall in that same ink. "You read, now you speak." Beneath it, a mirror, untouched, reflected Mark's face, except it was smiling. Desperate, Mark returned to Dr. Grant. She agreed to examine the house under one condition. She would bring a recording device. "We need evidence," she said. They entered at noon. By 2, she was shaking, staring at the walls. "This isn't just language," she whispered. "It's invocation." Her recorder caught sounds, low tones, syllables layered like a chant. As they left the house, she warned him, "You've opened something, not with a key, with your understanding." She refused to return. That night, Mark replayed the recording. At minute 34, there was a voice. Not his, not Elsie's. A third voice, clear, cold, and in English. "You cannot unknow." The town began to change. Neighbours stopped speaking to him. Birds avoided his roof. Children cried when passing his house. On a Sunday afternoon, an older woman knocked. She held an old rosary and whispered, "It's begun again." Before he could respond, she fled. Inside, the walls began peeling themselves. The script spread. into his books, his phone, even his body. He vomited black ink for days. When he tried to record it, the footage warped, showing a different room, one with dozens of people kneeling before a figure made entirely of shifting symbols. Mark's final act of sanity was writing a letter, not to the police, nor a friend, but to whoever might next own the house. He hid it behind the loose floorboard with the journal. In it, he wrote, "If you find this, don't read. Don't try to understand. Burn it. Leave." His handwriting was shaky, the last words trailing into swirls resembling the symbols. That night, he walked into the study and locked the door. No one ever saw him again. The stain remained. Months later, a young couple bought the cottage. "It just needs a little love," they smiled. The realtor painted over the stain. It returned within a week. Then came the smell. Then came the whispers. The husband found the journal while fixing the floor. "Looks like someone went crazy," he laughed. His wife tried to read it. That night, she spoke in her sleep. Not in English, not in anything he'd ever heard, and her eyes stayed open. The police would later find both of them, seated in the study, motionless. The walls were covered again, but this time in blood. The words, undecipherable. Only one phrase repeated near the center. "You read, now you speak." The house is empty now, but at night, those walking past say they hear sounds. A whispering chorus in no known tongue. And some say the stain is no longer a stain, it's a doorway, waiting. It started with a folder that shouldn't have been there. Martin was a 47-year-old maintenance supervisor at a small-town university library, the kind of place where nothing extraordinary ever happened. One rainy Thursday evening, while closing up the archives wing, he noticed a brittle manila folder lying on the center table. It wasn't labeled, and its edges looked freshly torn, as though someone had tried to remove it in haste. Curious, he opened it. Inside were 3 yellowed sheets, covered edge to edge in symbols. None he recognized. They weren't Latin, Cyrillic, Arabic, or any of the scripts he'd seen before. They looked more like elongated scratches than writing. As he turned the second page, a strange coldness wrapped around his neck, not unlike the chill of winter air, but it came from nowhere. Martin looked around, heart rate ticking up. He was alone. Still, something felt watched. He took the pages home, telling himself he'd show them to Claire, his wife, who dabbled in historical linguistics during her master's years. That night, over dinner, he pulled them out and spread them on the table. Claire's face turned from amusement to frowning curiosity. This isn't any language I know," she murmured. "It's structured, it has repetition, but these symbols, they're not human. I mean, not in any linguistic tree." Martin laughed nervously. "Maybe it's some kind of artist's prank." Claire didn't smile. Instead, she leaned closer, tracing one of the lines with her fingertip. "Why do I feel like I've seen this before?" she whispered. Then, without warning, she stood up and backed away from the table. "Where did you get this?" That night, they couldn't sleep. A low humming seemed to fill the air, subtle but persistent, like the sound of a faraway generator. Martin checked the power. Nothing was wrong. But in the middle of the night, Claire woke him with a scream. "They're here!" she cried, eyes wide, pointing to the corner of their bedroom. Martin jumped up, flicked the light on. Nothing, but Claire kept staring, shivering. In the morning, she refused to speak of it. Her hands trembled as she made coffee. Martin decided to take the pages back to the library. But when he opened his briefcase, they were gone. In their place was a small square of paper, written in the same strange script, but now one symbol was glowing faintly red. Panicking, Martin went back to the archives wing. Everything looked the same. He retraced his steps, scanning every shelf, every table, and then, behind a cabinet, he noticed something odd, a sliver in the wall. He pulled the cabinet aside. There was a door he'd never seen before, a door without a handle, covered in dust. He called security. When the guard arrived, Martin pointed to it, but the man frowned. "What door?" Martin blinked. It was gone. No sign of dust disturbed, no sliver, just wall. Claire grew worse over the next few days. She spoke less and stared at empty spaces more. Sometimes she'd mumble, repeating sounds that didn't make sense, guttural and sharp syllables. Once, Martin found her in the garden at 3 a.m. drawing those same symbols in the dirt with her fingers, humming a haunting tune. Desperate, Martin took a picture of one of her drawings and posted it anonymously to an online linguistics forum. The responses varied, but one stood out. A private message that read, "Stop. Do not try to translate. You are not meant to read it." Attached was an image of a burned page with identical symbols. He called the number in the profile. A man answered. His voice was weak, shaking. "You found the language, didn't you?" Martin paused. "You know what it is? It's not a language. It's a summoning. A script for awareness. You see them now, don't you?" Martin froze. "Once you've seen it, they notice. They remember. And if you try to speak it aloud, they'll come closer." Martin hung up, heart racing. He ran upstairs to tell Claire. But she was gone, not just missing. Her side of the bed was ice cold, her robe still hanging, the sheets undisturbed. On her pillow, another note, one symbol, glowing red. The police got involved. They searched the house, the neighborhood. No sign of struggle, no footprints. Just Claire's phone on the kitchen counter, unlocked. Last message drafted but unsent. "They're whispering again. I think they want me to follow." Martin became obsessed. He stopped going to work, stopped shaving. The walls of his study became a canvas of scribbled symbols, red markers, black pens. Even his own blood at one point. He believed decoding it would bring her back, but the humming was louder now. Sometimes the air vibrated. The lights flickered without cause. One night, Martin heard the front door creak open. He ran downstairs, but no one was there. Only a trail of muddy footprints. Small ones, barefoot, leading to the basement. He followed, flashlight in hand. In the far corner of the basement wall, he saw something shift. A shimmer. As if reality there wasn't quite stable. He reached out and passed through. Behind the wall was a chamber, not made by humans. The walls were covered in script, glowing softly, pulsing like breath. And in the center stood Claire, still, eyes wide, whispering words he couldn't understand. When she turned to him, her mouth didn't move, but he heard her, not in sound, but inside his bones. "You shouldn't have looked," her voice echoed. Martin fell to his knees. The script on the walls began to swirl, lines reforming, shifting into a tunnel of symbols. His vision blurred. The chamber pulsed faster. A figure emerged from the script itself, tall, unformed, eyes that weren't eyes. It moved like it was unraveling and forming at once. Martin screamed, but no sound came out. The thing pointed at him, and his mind burned with symbols. He awoke in the library's archives wing, lying on the cold tile floor. The folder was on the table again. Just one page left now. One glowing symbol. Red. No one remembered Claire. Not his neighbours. Not her family. Photos on the wall had changed. Pictures where she once stood now showed Martin alone. The humming hadn't stopped. He hears them when he sleeps. He dreams in that script now. And each time he dreams, one more symbol appears somewhere in his home, glowing faintly, watching.